Good afternoon. Welcome to the 5th edition of Azure MVP Unplugged. Today we are with Magnus.
Hello.
With Stanislav.
Hello.
Radoslav.
Hi, everyone.
Evelyn and myself. And we will talk about security. We will cover some essential part of Azure Security, and we will talk about what is reasonable to use even if we have limited budget. I suppose that this will be very interesting discussion for most of you. And let's now start with Magnus. Welcome, Magnus. You are our guest, and we are really glad that so famous person like you are at our event.
Oh my
You're the
God!
superstar, man.
Don't let my children hear that; they will die from laughter. Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be with you guys today. I wish so much that we could be traveling together and actually physically meet up, but it's not in the books for the current time, it seems. But did you want me to maybe introduce myself quickly?
Yes, please.
Absolutely. So I live in Malmö in Sweden, in southern Sweden, just across the water from Copenhagen, which is in Denmark, where I am employed in Denmark right now with a company that is part of the larger corporation Devo team. Company is called CLOUDEON, and it's part of Devo team. So that means that we have about 8,000 employees in Devo team, and the work that I do now is that I'm one of the MVPs for Azure, one of the Microsoft MVPs for Azure from the beginning. So I have been an Azure MVP for over 10 years, and that's about the maximum you can have for Azure MVP. And which means that I have been working with cloud and Azure, and of course, including security questions for a very, very long time. I'm also a Microsoft Regional Director, which is kind of funny. It's strange because it sounds like I work for Microsoft. I don't. I don't have a region. I don't direct anything, and I don't work for Microsoft. But I'm a Microsoft Regional Director, which is funny. It means that I talk a lot with Microsoft closely on a VP level, which is fun. My work then, quickly, is that I work as the Chief Product Officer, CPO of CLOUDEON. And we're building managed service offerings and productizing managed service offerings for cloud, for mostly for enterprise. So the type of customers that we work with is the road administration or the national energy grid of Denmark, that sort of customer. And of course, compliance, security, and all those questions are an absolute essential for these people. Okay, sorry, that was long-winded, but that's me.
Yeah, very, very impressive. It will be good now also other guests to say few words about themselves. So, Stani, it is your turn.
Okay, I work for Sentia. Sentia are a managed service provider, one of the largest one in Western Europe. What I do is basically develop different solutions based on Azure services that we can manage our customers on Azure. So I'm basically leading that development part and the architecture of our so-called Sentia Azure landing zone.
Thank you, Stani. And now I would like to ask Radoslav to say some words about himself.
Okay, sure. So I basically help various companies ranging from startups to big enterprises to find their way in the cloud and to do things properly in the cloud. I typically join the teams of my clients as a cloud solution architect. I'm also a Microsoft MVP, and in the last 5 or 4 to 5 years, I've been involved with data platform-oriented solutions.
Thank you very much. And now it is the turn of Evelyn.
Hi all. It is really pleasure and honor, and thanks, Magnus, for joining. I guess it's going to be really interesting. At least I'm impressed, and have heard a lot from Michael about you. So my name is Evelyn Andreev, and I'm a CTO of ICB Digital, which is a Norwegian entity, and solution architect at ICB, which is the Bulgarian mother company. Our team is mainly working in the areas of IoT, we have multiple IoT solutions and cloud solutions as well, but lots of multiple projects. I have lots of other things I'm doing, but they are in the direction of European projects, etc., which is completely relevant for this particular meeting. And I have been enthusiastic in machine learning and security for many years. So I'm trying to push everything which I know and learn in the team, so get my hands dirty with things like that, and of course propose solutions to our customers in these directions.
Thank you very much. And probably we can start our discussion about Azure Security with Magnus. Magnus, what exactly you can explain about your understanding, what we need for Azure Security, what we need to know, like general principles, and what is the most important here?
That is an excellent and quite large question. I won't take up all the time, and I think that every one of the gentlemen here in the panel today can probably talk about Azure Security for a good week, if you let us. So we're going to have to focus in. And I think that one thing that has occupied me a lot lately is to onboard, really get people going towards the cloud and start using the cloud. And I want to say here in the opening something that I find really fascinating. Because in the beginning of Azure, in the beginning of the cloud, really, that was a scenario where the established, pre-cloud IT departments were reluctant and hesitant to use the cloud. And one of the grievances was the lack of compliance and security in the cloud. Not that it was insecure as such, but that it wasn't certified, that it wasn't on point. And it's been some years now, but it actually came to a tipping point where the cloud providers, Azure included, all of them, were able to demonstrate how they were actually more secure, and it was easier to be compliant using these platforms as compared to the effort that you would have to put in if you were doing this yourself. Do you agree with this?
I think that there is no one who will disagree.
we're probably preaching to the choirs in this panel, of course, but it's interesting because I've been on that journey. I've seen the earlier-ish, where people were saying, listen, we can't go to the cloud because it's not compliant or something like that, right? But that has tipped over now. And what has happened, of course, is that Azure and the other cloud platforms have all the certifications, the ISO standards, and all. They're ticking all the check boxes, depending on which market you are, European market, US markets. They have the great standards checked off for security and things like that. And it's all about trust, of course. Can we trust the cloud? And nowadays, we can very much indeed trust the cloud. And so I've been occupied with onboarding companies, enterprises that have not yet done much cloud to the cloud and to be secure and compliant and so on. The challenge with this is, in my opinion, that when many of them start out, they do not have enough mileage, they do not have enough experienced people and enough knowledge to start in a secure and compliant way. They start by doing something, and then a little bit later, they discover how bad their security score is in Azure. There's a Azure Security Center with a security score, and then they discover that they're not in fact compliant, and then they have to append or add or fix that scenario later, and it's so difficult to do. What is interesting for me is to provide enough help, guidance, tools, services to launch any company into the cloud in a compliant and secure way from the beginning. Security is nothing you add. It's not something you add as a feature later. You have to start by being secure, but then the difficulty becomes, can you even start at all?
Magnus, a quick one.
Yeah.
Do you think? I mean, of course, you know the answer, but the point is, you're probably following some kind of guidelines. You're following a procedure. How do you go through this journey?
Well, that's a great question. The way we do it is we have to, of course, interview the customer to understand where they are. But we have found quite recently that it is not okay to come into a customer conversation and sit down and be, open arms and say, okay, we're here now, we're going to help, things will be great. What would you like? Because that's just really a bad way to get going. Either they don't know what they like, or the things that they like or think they want are maybe not completely informed because they do not have enough information, or they have some assumptions that really are a bad fit for the cloud. So what we are doing is delivering, that's why we're delivering this as more as a product, right? We come in with 80% or more, 90%, as many as possible of the important decisions already made. So here is the product, it is secure. And then we show them all the ways by which it is secure. When they do have an opinion, they do have something they need to have otherwise, we, of course, offer them to help them adapt the solution to their specific requirement. But we found that it is more constructive and much faster to launch when we come in and say, listen, we have some experience in this area and we're going to help you get going strongly, agile mode here quick. And you are going to have some active guardrails around you where you will be, your teams that are going to deploy to Azure will be helped along the way to be successful. They're going to be enabled to do what they need to do while being helped to be on the path of compliance and security. That's how we are approaching this. And we find that's very much more constructive because they really need help and they don't want to, or they are not in a place where they can really, it's not constructive for them to say, oh, blank paper, we can wish whatever we want.
But if we assume that we would steal your job and do what you do, where to start from? I mean, there is, of course, two sides of the coin. One is some of us may be participating on behalf of a company which needs to improve security.
Yeah.
Others may be the providers that are in the role of consultants. Of course, they're consulting programs, and you get a badge that you are able to consult and perform some kind of assessment, etc.
Yeah.
So, speaking of something written on paper, a procedure, what do you follow? I mean, it is to a large extent natural, of course, to start with these conversations.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we do follow the guidance that Microsoft have collected in the thing that we all have probably in best case, love-hate relationship to, or maybe even a hate-hate relationship. But there is a massive framework of advice and documentation that Microsoft have gathered, which is the cloud adoption framework. We can think what we want about it, but what I found is that it is a useful conversation piece, and it gives everyone, you can go and find this in Microsoft Docs, the cloud adoption framework. It gives a structure to have a conversation around, which is easy to refer to and that everybody can relate to in a constructive way. Then, of course, everyone, every company, yours, mine, every company will want to add their own little secret sauce on top of that, just some nice sprinkles that are just the key reason why we are doing this in a better way than the other people, right? Everyone trying to do the same. But we found that that's a constructive starting point, and it gives a framework. And then, of course, turning on all the relevant things inside of example Security Center to use the Azure Defender settings in Security Center and ensuring that everything is there. And then you can start looking at various perceived threats and things that you need to upgrade to have a better security.
So you mean the cloud adoption framework, the Azure cloud adoption framework in its security part. This is the procedure which you would, let us say, recommend.
I would say it's a constructive start, right? Okay. As such, the cloud adoption framework should have the emphasis on the word framework. It's not the law. It's not the commandments. It is a comprehensive collection of a lot of experiences from very many customers that Microsoft have collected, curated, and put out this general guidance. But it's not the end of the road. You have to also be able to understand it and consume it and apply it. And I believe I checked recently, there's almost 700 markdown files. I don't know how many pages or words that is, and over 2,000 images in the cloud adoption framework. It is a massive thing. But it does have a good, strong section on security. I would go there to start reading up on things.
Thanks.
Yeah, great explanation. And probably we will talk later also, is it possible to have security on a reasonable price? Because security in general is something which is expensive. It is important, but it is expensive. Doesn't matter on which platform we will consider security. And this is another case, how to be possible to implement security for smaller companies, for startups on a reasonable price.
I have extra question, Mike, to what you say. I mean, Magnus has been talking about implementing security from bottom up, like security by design in accordance with the policy of the company, with its objectives, etc. But at some point of time, you need this security to be assessed, someone to perform. I mean, at the end, it is not just self-declaration. Are you doing this? Yes, it's fine. But you may not be doing this. The point is, it is by design, but at some point of time, you need to make an assessment and to verify that you meet certain security requirements. What you do then? I'm asking these questions because I have been there during this year and I have bad history to share.
Yeah, thank you for clarification. Okay, then probably we can also discuss a little bit more about specific areas where we can consider security. And because we already started with Magnus, probably some important things related to identity and access management will be very useful for our attendees.
Yeah, and I know that additional people here are strong in this area as well. It is one of the most overlooked areas, in my opinion, when it comes to just general compliance thinking. So I'm going to quickly give you sort of the understanding of what happens here. If you're a small company, a smaller company, I mean, maybe it starts with your manager putting down the credit card to purchase Azure. Maybe it ends up with you buying an enterprise agreement, and that's a much larger commitment. But no matter how and at what scale you are consuming Azure, it turns out that it is either a non-technical manager or a maybe less technical project manager or similar who becomes the risk owner of the project, who owns the security, perhaps, owns the subscription, perhaps, right? Who has the topmost level access. The problem with these people in this case is that they are very, very bad at understanding technology and how to grant access in a proper way. So instead of owning that responsibility and being able to execute upon it, they delegate that to, the tech people, the team, the 20 technologists. They should know what to do here. So we're just going to give them ownership of the subscriptions. That's fine, and they can go figure everything out. Honestly, nothing could be more wrong. And so it is about understanding how to give appropriate access always. And there are many practices that you need to work on to have in place parallel to this. For example, if you want to have a very secured and very compliant production environment, maybe you consider not by default granting the developers any type of contributor access to this space, maybe only read-only access, right? And then you have to have all kinds of practices with continuous development, continuous integration with automated deployments to be able to support that. So the only thing that can touch the production environment is, in fact, the automation. That's a security measure, but then you have to know about, all of a sudden, Devops, right? Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. And DevOps is another important topic. Probably we will go a little bit deeper in this area. Do you want to share something from your experience?
Me?
Yes.
Well, DevOps is a sweet, one of those tools, or rather practices that you should really you should have that, because it opens up so much else. Like, for example, being able to secure your production environment. But imagine this, right? Even from even including the topic of security. Here's how I look at DevOps. If I can come to a customer and I can take my mouse pointer and I can hover over the delete button on their testing environment, and I can say, okay, what if I delete this thing? And if they go all panicky and crazy, it's like, no, don't touch it. Oh my God, what are you doing? Then they might be in trouble. They maybe haven't automated enough. If I go there and hover over it and I say, can I delete this? And they're like, yeah, you go ahead. I delete it, and they run a pipeline, and the thing deploys, and it's back. Then they probably have automated an appropriate amount. Because what that leads to is all kinds of things that maybe aren't a topic for today. It leads to the ability to auto-scale. It leads to the ability to deploy a quick testing environment just for the day. It leads to the ability to delete development and test over the weekend, over the holidays, or even over the night. So it leads to so many benefits if you are in an organization that fully have embraced the notion of DevOps, including, of course, also increased security.
Thank you very much. I think that it is really very good on the conceptual part, and we will talk probably a little bit later about some details. But now I would like to also ask Stanislav for some important things related to area where he's really very deep, like expert, and this area is related to Azure Policy. So can you share what exactly we need to know in this area?
Let me share my screen. Can you see it now?
Yep.
Okay, so I want to talk about Azure Policy, and one of the things that you should know about Azure Policy, because it's a unique service not only for Azure but for among the other clouds as well, is that Azure Policy sits in the same level as the Azure Resource Manager API, or the API that basically manage your resources. For this allows you basically to say, I want to deny, for example, the deployment of specific virtual machine sizes, or I want to allow only specific virtual machine sizes. And then no matter who is trying to do that via the portal or the CLI or PowerShell or directly accessing the API, they will not be able to deploy a different SKU than those that are allowed. So basically, that allows for the policy, for Azure policy, to be like a custodian for your resources as long as you configure it correctly. So by default, we have these policy definitions that are built in by Microsoft. The policy definitions basically allows are rules that says what you can do and not do on different resources in your Azure environment. And when you actually want to apply some policy, you basically create assignments based on the policy definition. So, but you can also create custom policies as well if you think that those that are available are not suiting your needs. But by default, you get a lot of built-in policies, and you can search for different security areas that you can basically apply these policies and secure your environment even before it started. So we have a lot of policies around TLS, for example, SQL Database, domain services, for the app services. You can, for example, enforce TLS 1.2 to make sure your resources that has this kind of option, they are secured enough. We also have this option around local authentication. It's a quite a new setting on several resources available. Basically, local authentication allows you to authenticate to Azure resources by just using Azure AD. As you know, some resources have things like primary keys, private keys, or something like that. So if you don't want to allow such kind of, let's say, goat mode master to those resources, you can basically enable local authentication. Basically disable the local authentication and just allow the authentication from Azure AD objects. The good thing about Azure Policy is that not only allows you to, let's say, I want to audit or deny something, it can actually configure something even if it's not specified. So let's say that someone is deploying Azure Automation account, and they have said that they want to enable local authentication. When you configure, for example, this policy, when the resource is being deployed, no matter what says in their API call or RAM template or bicep deployment, the actual setting will be set to disable the local authentication, just because policy will take precedence over that. And you can see that that is because the policy has effect of modify. So this is quite powerful way to actually protect your environment. Keep in mind that Azure Policy is free for the Azure resources. Of course, when you enable certain security feature, you might pay, but you have to check which security feature you want to enable or deny or enforce. Additionally, I want to state out that you also have these guest configuration policies. So the guest configuration policies basically will enforce settings on the VMs. So not so recently, they released a way that not only to audit the policies that are on the VMs, but also to enforce them. For example, you can see here that this will basically enable BitLocker service on the virtual machine if it's not enabled. So you're going to see more and more of these ability to basically enforce the actual settings on the virtual machines as well. For those that are not dealing with virtual machines but are dealing with Kubernetes, there is also now the ability to enforce Kubernetes policies as well. So, for example, disable automating API credentials and such kind of policies that basically go to the Kubernetes cluster and applies those within the Kubernetes deployment. And you can also have custom of those. So if you don't see something that is applicable for you as a security measure, you can create your own Kubernetes policy to be applied. These are based on standards, so if you have been dealing with such policies before, it should be easy to create them. Forgot the exact standard, but it's an open source standard that basically allows you to develop these in a YAML files and basically point to these YAML files, and those will be enforced into your environment. So it's good that you look at every policy and see different settings that you have available. Another thing is important that you have the policies itself, which are specific policy for specific thing, but there is also those things called initiatives. Basically, initiatives are a group of different policies that are in a single, that you can basically enforce in a single assignment. And this usually covers some specific compliance regulations. So if you have compliance for certain ISO, you can just go here and do the assignment. And I'm going to choose one of my subscriptions, and you can go to see the parameters. This specific policy has only these parameters you can configure, but some of the policies has more parameters depending on how many actually policy definitions are in a single initiative, and which of these policy actually have configure input parameters. So the input parameters will also depend on your environment. This is the shortest thing I wanted to say, and it's a very valuable to start using Azure Policy if you haven't started, and if you have starting with a new environment, it's something definitely something to consider to deploy from the start. For those who are looking of actually managing those policies not from the UI, but from something like CI/CD, infrastructure as a code, etc. You can do those via, for example, Bicep. If you want, also ARM templates are also supported. But you can build these, you can build your own policy definitions via Bicep and deploy them as code, and then you can also do the policy assignment of those that definition again via code. So it's very easy to do. This particular example is from the official Azure Bicep GitHub repo, where there are examples of different resources being deployed, and the policies as a native Azure resource, they basically can be deployed with ARM and Bicep.
Imagine that some of our attendees are not experts in Azure policies. Can you recommend some good practices that they need to consider when start to use this feature?
Yeah. So one of the things that you should consider is the CIS Microsoft Azure Foundation benchmark. Currently, it's a version 1.30. There are some other versions, but that is something that you should enable. Most of the policies are in audit mode, so when you actually are deploying this policy or this policy initiative to your environment, it will not cause any interruption. So it's a good way to start to see where you're lacking something. For example, here it says you should enable Azure Defender server for servers. Of course, it's up to you to decide if you have the budget to pay for that service. But it gives you one quick step that you can just see from a security point of view where you are with your environment. And there are other policies. The other one is from the Azure Security Center. It's also free policy, so you can just deploy it. It's a security benchmark, so you can try to deploy those, and then you're gonna see the compliance when the policy starts to check the resources for their compliance, and you can then discover what kind of policies are in that initiative, and basically decide what you should implement. The policy also has description, so you can see what's the policy about, and of course, as the policies are just basically definitions that are in the API, you can basically see what they actually do and how they are being applied. So in any case, you can also copy existing policy, modify it according to your needs, and then deploy it and test it and apply it to your environment.
Good. Thank you very much. It is really very important, and hope that many people from our attendees and other people who later start use this feature will take a look at our streaming, which will be recorded, and probably they have some good insights. And the next important question is from where to start learn about security, about Azure security. And probably Radoslav can share some very good practices and good insights from where to start exactly.
Yep, why not? So let me share my screen. I have a very useful slide for you. This is the one actually. So a couple of times we have already mentioned about the security documentation that comes from Microsoft. And to be honest, it's all over the place, and sometimes it's very hard to navigate around what is actually suggested and where to find it, where to find the good practices and tips. So let's put some structure on this, because there are various different security documents that can be used across the entire organization. Because the problem with security is that everyone understands security differently, and most likely that's because of their role that they have in the company. So if we start with the row on the left hand side, we can see that at the top there is the CEO, and then the C-level executives, and if we go down, there is the actual engineers that are implementing your cloud services. So those different groups of people deal with different types of problems. So the C-level executives, along with the CEO, discuss high-level practices, high-level strategies, how to secure, for example, the digital transformation of the company, how to apply business and security integration, and things like that. Also, when it comes to the technical leadership, they're interested in defining the security strategy of the company, to define the programs and the bigger epics. And that's typically covered in the cloud adoption framework. So this is very applicable for organizations that have not yet adopted the cloud, but it is also very useful for organizations that are already using the cloud, because the cloud adoption framework is a living document, and it receives a lot of updates around the time. So there are different versions of the cloud adoption framework, and this is something that you should revisit very often, because there are updates, and something that is a best practice today can be the worst practice tomorrow, or something like that. So you have to revisit this. When it comes to the architects and the technical managers, they probably want to define the architecture and the policies. We already talked about the policies. And if we're talking about the architecture, there is a very good slide deck that is delivered by the Microsoft Cybersecurity Reference Architecture. It is a very visual way of defining things and strategies across the company. So you can learn about how to secure your cloud or how to secure your multi-cloud posture as well, how to apply things like zero trust security, and also how to protect from ransomware. And as a matter of fact, this slide is a part of this Microsoft cybersecurity reference architectures. So make sure you check it. So if we go down the ladder, there is the technical planning that should happen just before the actual implementation. And we have to consult with the different documentation about the different Azure services, what is possible with them, what are the possible security controls that are supported. And besides that, there is also the Azure Security benchmark that you can see on the right-hand side.
Revolution. My name is.
Yep. So it contains it basically can be split into two parts: the controls and the baselines. So the controls of Azure Security benchmark are coming from the Center of Security of Internet Security, that's CIS, and the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. So those two frameworks are the source of most of the controls. But the controls that are part of the Azure Security benchmark are especially targeting the cloud-centric security. So with that, you basically see what are the recommendations that are applicable across your Azure tenant or the different services that you use. And it also identifies a list of the stakeholders that can be interested in this control that you're looking at. And the second part of the Azure Security benchmark are the baselines. So those are, this is a set of documents that defines how to apply the various controls coming from the security benchmark to particular Azure services that you're using. And below the Azure Security benchmark, you can see the well-architected framework that I think we have already mentioned. It contains 5 pillars that are focusing on different topics. And one of the topics is security. And the well-architected framework, the way at least I see it, is that it provides the recommendations in a very focused manner so that you can go ahead and apply them. Whereas the cloud adoption framework is more of a high-level document. And besides that, the well-architected framework also contains a set of assessments that you can do for your cloud workloads. And it will help you, they will help you to understand where do you stand in terms of security. So with that, by following all those documents and guides, they will contribute to applying the same standard practices across Azure and across the multi-cloud story. But the thing is that they just operate on a different level, but they will take you to the same, to follow the same security patterns after all. So that was what I wanted to share with you in regards to where to learn more about security.
Thank you very much. And there is another aspect because as we know, security often is related to data. Data is very sensitive part of the overall IT industry. And regarding to this, probably you can also share some insights about good practices and probably also specific implementation related to security in Azure data services and storage.
Okay, sure. I will go through some of the controls that are supported on the various services. But unfortunately, I don't have slides for that. So we will just talk and maybe discuss. So let's start with the data. Maybe the data is one of the most important assets of the company. And we usually store it in data lakes or databases. But when it comes to data lakes, we can apply the security controls on several different layers. So at first, we can encrypt the data at rest. So there are two types of encryption. You can follow the client side. You can utilize the client-side encryption, basically technologies, and the server-side encryptions. And the whole idea is that if you encrypt something on the client side, basically the cloud vendor will be unable to understand your data because you encrypt it on the client side, and therefore you have to decrypt it on the client side as well. And when it comes to data encryption on the server side, that is usually called data encryption at rest. Basically, you have a couple of options, and those are to encrypt your data with service managed keys that are managed by the platform itself, or with bringing your own customer managed keys in a service like Azure Key Vault, and use those keys to encrypt your data. And there is actually a third option to manage the keys, and this is in a customer controlled hardware, but unfortunately this is not yet supported by most of the services. So what else you can do apart from encryption? You can probably also enable Azure Defender that gives you an additional layer of security that basically detects the unusual and potentially harmful actions that are happening on your account. So it can detect things like attempts to access or exploit your storage accounts coming from outside. But it comes with an additional cost, and you have to onboard your subscriptions for Azure Defender. That will automatically enable Azure Defender for all the applicable services. So what else you can do? You can secure your data in transit by enabling things like HTTPS and enforcing the latest version of TOS. And partly you can monitor those with Azure Policies, but I'm just outlining what are the best practices to do right away while you are deploying your data lake storage accounts. And the very bad practice is to use the storage account access key or even shared access key. The better idea would be to use security principles that are coming right from your Azure Active Directory tenant. Because if you use the account access key, the bad thing about it is that it can leak outside of your application, and it essentially gives access to everyone who is possessing the key. And you can also utilize access control lists on the Azure Data Lake account instead of using the Azure RBAC, because the ACLs of Data Lake gives you a better control over what is accessible within your Data Lake account. Because otherwise, if you use the Azure RBAC account, it will just grant some type of role to a whole container or the whole account even. So the ACLs gives you a better controlling the access. And that was pretty much all about that I wanted to share with you about Data Lake Gen 2. So let's move to Azure Sql Database. You know, the most usual relational database that is being used, and it's coming from Microsoft. So when it comes to data encryption, you also have the opportunities to enforce it on the server side or on the client side. On the server side, it's called transparent data encryption, while on the client side, it's called always encrypted. But pretty much the idea is the same. you have an additional means of controlling encryption by enforcing it on cell level and column level. And that's something that gives you a more granular control over the encryption, because you control the columns that should be encrypted and also the keys that should be used.
Just one question to be more clear for our attendees. In which cases we will take advantages of this kind of security on cell, row level, what we need to consider? At least regarding to my practice, usually it is when we need to have some kind of multi-tenancy in the same database, but probably you can provide some insights where exactly we need to use these features.
Yeah, so the transparent data encryption is just a matter of, well, it comes by default, so you should better enable it. It doesn't affect your code at all. Whereas the client-side encryption, basically your client-side application should prepare that always encrypted is being used, so they have access to the proper keys. And if we don't want to go to direction to encrypt the data with client-side encryption, we can enforce it on a cell level or on column level. So compared with transparent data encryption, basically the transparent data encryption works at the data in the pages, whereas the cell level or the column level encryption gives you the opportunity to pick and choose what columns to be encrypted. And if you have different groups of people that are accessing your database, you can also control things like who is able to, let's say, see the numbers of the credit cards via what's called the dynamic data masking, which is not really encryption. It just presents the raw data is in encrypted format to a particular set of user. So it basically replaces a part of the number of the credit card, for example, with asterisks.
Yeah, thank you very much about these insights, and probably we can continue with Azure Security for developers and what is related to developers, because many of us used to be developers in the past, including me and probably most of you. So I will ask Evelyn to share his experience regarding to what exactly developers need to consider in the context of Azure Security, and some good practices, of course.
Okay, I'm about to share a screen first. Give me a couple of seconds. And I'm going to share the whole of the screen. And I have a tiny presentation about that one. Okay, I guess it's online.
Yep.
Okay. So I hope it's not going to be a kind of a misunderstanding. I'm going to have a tiny overlap with what Radoslav said, but first of all, security is having different aspects. What are the subjects which need to be which need to be secured? First of all, it could be data theft, stealing data from company, compromising in some way. This could be this company's own data, or in some even worse case, it could be data which this company is managing for someone else. Also, it could be identity theft, someone who is not authorized performing certain actions. It could start with phishing attack. It could be focused spear phishing or general. It could be brute force login, which is some kind of a pattern which is easily discoverable. Or it could be security issues that are related to availability, like denial of service attacks or ransomware. Yeah, I know you guys, you're probably monitoring some of the groups, and you see that too many attacks in our country have, whatever new system appears, it is within hours down because of some hackers or bad scalability. Where this journey starts from, it's what I wanted to emphasize here is it possible to just use the tools? Microsoft they put out a new tool for security. This security is for app service, it's for some data service. Just go and use it. It is never just the security in tools. So if we speak of technology, I also place this thing on the picture, that there is a process which is around that. So we need to follow some guidelines in order to be consistent in application of these tools. Like if you go to the store and buy some screwdrivers, magnifying glass, pincers, or whatever, this is not making you automatically watchmaker if you have these tools in your hands. Where our story began. We're having not about going into many details on that, but we're having a product which we want to go through security certification, and we want to put a badge on our website. So we're in this with this hat, in these shoes. We want to make something ours to be secure. Of course, we have been following some guidelines, but is it secure? Yes or no? This was my comment to Magnus, because even if you are a consultant, if you're following some practices, at some point of time you need to know where you are. You need to measure the progress. So we contacted certain number of Microsoft officials, I would say 10 plus people, and we addressed them with a question: guys, please propose us an organization which could make an assessment whether we are using Azure in a secure way to make our IoT solution, because we want to have a label, we want to have a badge to verify a certain level of compliance. Believe it or not, this question wasn't having a very good answer, meaning we didn't go a lot further on that. We wanted to have some badge like this or like this to put it on and address our customers and assure them that we cover a certain level of security standard. Typically, the security schemes are in levels. Something like basic security requirements. Usually, they are started with. This is the important part here. You see, some are with green, some are with red. Level 1 and level 2 usually are declaration of conformance. So you fill in checklist, say, I do this. My users cannot use passwords that are shorter than. Okay, check. You could go and see such checklist lists on OWASP or other similar initiatives. For level 2, you also need to do something something like this, and it's again compliance with security by design, or what Magnus said in the very beginning. But for level 3 and level 4, it is, you say you comply with level 3, then you would need to go through a test lab and being pen tested. For level 4 or for level 3, it is static code analysis, for example, has to be executed on the binaries. Frankly, we ended up hiring a security oriented person who is capable of doing these tests on our side, so that we could prepare for this for level 3 and level 4. Frankly saying, he discovered quite interesting things, which imagine the following case. You are using virtual machine with a service. It's not it's still a part of our Azure platform, but he managed to discover how in this external service, because there is a well-known vulnerability and it wasn't patched, and he managed to discover how to log in without even a user. So it was really mind-blowing. So even if you're following some principles at the end, yes, it is good to go into the real world and being tested under control environment. The challenge is that everything is going to be secure nowadays. So it's like, guys, are you interested in buying a firewall for your toaster or other home appliance? So probably quite soon we'll end up in a situation like this. But the general motivation is that for some companies, it is good for sales purposes to have security certification when you're selling a product. Well, the guys from Microsoft referred us to something is because we're working on an IoT-based, IoT-related solution and platform. What is, let us say, very new there is an initiative called Industrial Internet Consortium, and it is taking more than 250 companies in this initiative, and Microsoft are a part of this initiative. Some of the primary authors, I managed to talk to them in person, to Matthew Abel from Praetorian and Ron Zahavi from Microsoft Azure IoT. Oops, sorry. And if you see the domain, the subdomains, and the practices, the things that are related to the developers are probably only in these areas. So this reminds me of a project, a European project I was working more than 10 years ago. At some point of time, developers think, I'm doing the real work. I'm coding, I'm testing it, I'm deploying it. So it's all about me. No, it's not about. It's not all about development. It is also about culture in the organization. It is about program. It is about policy. It's about consistency. Just imagine if you make the perfect secure software, but you have a very poor level of physical protection. Then you haven't done nothing. So your solution isn't that secure. So this initiative exists from 2017, and the model is broken into 3 security domains: governance, enablement, and hardening. Our team is currently working on a secure software, I would say, on a secure hardware, and it needs to go. Hardening needs to go before setting up our software. So we're installing an Ubuntu operating system, but it needs to be hardened. The ports need to be closed, regardless of the development which you're doing. And it is similar with Azure. You could think that you don't need to do anything in with regards to the hardening of the platform itself. But if you're making an IoT solution and the IoT hardware which you are deploying is vulnerable itself, then you again have a breach. So you need a holistic overview of that, because very rarely the solution starts in Azure and ends in Azure. We see hybrid solutions, integration with on-premises systems, import of data from somewhere could introduce you cross-site scripting, which you encounter in your secure application, which has multi-factor authentication. It has web application firewall in front of it. Your APIs are behind web API management, etc. But you import data from untrusted location. These data are not properly sanitized when you display them, and at the end you're vulnerable. So really, the whole holistic approach is important here. So here with that one, the objectives are to foster collaboration. So the technicals, the tech experts, and the stakeholders could follow the same goal. Define the framework, have performance indicators so that you know where you are, and guiding the process of maturing. These documents are available as PDFs. So one of the document it's roughly 140 pages or so. I have it as reference. This slide is to a certain extent overlap with what my colleague Radu had in mind before this. This is the security benchmarks, controls, and baselines. The baselines are interesting because they are the implementation of the benchmark on individual Azure service. So you could go there, you could pick your service. There are more than 100 of such baselines. You could go there and read about the service which you are using and how to make it more secure. The security controls, which also Rado mentioned, are a high-level description of the features. But let us say for developers, yeah, they aid to the holistic approach. But yeah, I know you want to touch the technology, so go to the security baselines, of course. And the benchmarks are now there is a version 2 of this of the benchmark. The security baselines, which are mostly interesting for developers, are probably these, or at least to me. So it's security baselines for app service, web application firewall, app management, SQL database, security service bus, logic apps. By the way, service bus in Azure is my favorite service. I really love it. If there is a service which I love and trust most, that is that one. So Event Hub, Event Grid, probably, and storage. These are the most interesting for developers. The web application firewall is one of the if you're a developer, probably one of the most interesting one, and those which you would use most would be web application firewall and API management. The web application firewall is centralized protection of web application for some common exploits like SQL or cross-site scripting. So it is monitoring the traffic. The web application firewall implements OWASP rule sets. I think there were 3 or 4 rule sets from OWASP, depending on the version. And most likely you're going to deploy it behind application gateway, which is for the original scenario, or this is the only one which I have touched myself. It is not that expensive, somewhat between 15 and 300 euro per month. It depends a lot. And the funny thing is that it could work in a detection mode. So you could, without interfering with the traffic, you could start with a detection mode, which is not blocking the incoming request and causing some trouble if you have misconfigured. And yes, it's all about policies, and there the big reading comes, and you need to touch a lot, and yeah, it wouldn't work from the first time. You may make a wrong configuration in the beginning, etc. So that one is probably the hard part. Setting it up is a piece of cake. So basically, that is what I'm having in mind to share the takeaways. The security maturity model, there is a link to it. Yeah, it was stressful for me to at least to not get some direct response from Microsoft. Okay, if you want to make this and make your Azure solution or IoT solution certified and get a badge, this is a list of companies that are making such kind of an assessment, and they could provide you with such. Basically, if you want to do so, you need to find the proposal from Microsoft is to find the companies that are certified according to this security maturity model, and they should be capable to perform an assessment and issue such certification for you. Okay, that was what I was having in mind. By the way, I would really challenge Magnus, if he has heard our story, to, I don't know, comment a little bit whether we have done something wrong here, or he has another way to go.
So honestly, I was just gonna say, when given the opportunity here, that these are some really good, jump ins with little presentations and lots of key takeaways that I'm impressed. I think you're doing all the good things and all the right things. This is a big landscape. It's difficult to navigate, and which is why, honestly, most of the companies that I come across are doing it, from pretty badly to almost not at all. And it's not intended to be an insult, because if you insult everybody equally at the same time, then you're actually not insulting anyone. And it's just a call out, rather, that this is a huge area and it's perceived as very difficult to comprehend. And many or most do not have the necessary skills and experience. And I would recommend anyone who feels that they're new to this territory. Maybe they are experienced, strong security people, and they would bring a lot of their years of experience and expertise to the table, for sure, and that's not to be ignored. But if they, honestly, look at these links, rather, maybe that you just showed, and they feel, they should introspect and say, okay, I really don't know enough about this. I should get an expert in the room. I should get one of you guys in the room, someone who can really help to get going in the right direction. That's worth, as from a business perspective, oh my God, so much more than trying to learn with time and money to figure this out by yourself.
We were on the other side of the table. Actually, we were searching for such people. We were searching for such practitioners.
Right.
And we weren't having, and still are not having, that deep knowledge and consistent and holistic knowledge. So we were thinking, someone is going to assess us according to something. So let us go and see what he's going to follow, so that we could prepare for it.
Yeah.
So we started backwards, and still we didn't find anyone who could perform this assessment for us. So as I mentioned, we hired a professional who has been doing this, very nice guy, and he's helping with such things which we couldn't even think about it.
There you go. That's exactly how hard it is, because this, if you're listening to this live stream now or watching it later, maybe, honestly, if you want to know a nice career direction, this is one. Study hard, of course. You need to do with many things, but the whole cloud security gambit with everything that goes in there, that's going to be pretty solid work for the coming years, right? We think maybe the cloud is big today, but as a general note, it's ranked around, 10-12% of the entire compute market is in cloud. And we think cloud is so huge. Well, it's only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So this would be an area to invest in as either young or someone who wants to get into a fascinating and challenging but rewarding industry. Cloud security, go for it.
Thanks.
Thank you. And I have a few questions which we didn't discuss in advance, but probably it will be interesting for all people who joined this streaming. One of these questions is related to what is the most important for each of you that we need to consider in the context of Azure security when we start to work on some solutions. It is a tough question, but probably each of you have some own understanding about this. Probably we can start with Magnus.
Oh, no.
Frankly, I even do not know what you're asking about. I mean, what is the most important?
There are many important things, of course. My point is what you consider on the first place when you start to think about new Azure solution?
In terms of security specifically. Well, I actually I'm gonna fall back to the identity and access management. Identity not so much, but more access management, because I know how badly this is done in general, and the downstream implications of not mastering, or at least trying to really hard to take care of who has access to what. It leads to all other kinds of crap down the road. And security, a big one, but in compliance and the whole cost management. This is about enablement. It's not about removing the ability for people to have access to the things they need. It's not about constraining anyone. It is about giving everyone the access they need to perform the job function they need to do, and doing it in a way that allows them to feel that they don't need to take responsibility for things they have no business taking responsibility for. Enablement and giving a sense of being enabled to be accountable. As a professional, you probably want to be held accountable for the things that are in your specific area that you control, that you are the master of. That means that you cannot be giving access to everything, because that's going to turn into shit. And you need to have access in a convenient way. There's privileged identity management, just-in-time access, and that sort of thing, to get access to the right things when you need them in an appropriate manner. That is just butchered all over the cloud. People are not capable of setting up access appropriately, which leads to everyone having complete inappropriate access.
Yeah, it is really very important, and absolutely.
That's one of the first that I would go to.
Radu, what about you?
So my take on that is that we should never, we should always know that there is no 100% secure solution, whether it is in the cloud or whether it is on premises, because there are threats and vulnerabilities that are coming each and every day. Even the cloud providers are not 100% secure, but at least we can stay close to 100% by following some multi-versed, multi-layer approach for doing security. Because if we follow all the aspects that are related to security, like network security, identity management, data protection, logging, and threat detection, and all the other different aspects related to security, you have a better chance to protect against any security incidents, and you just have to stay alert.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Ivo, what about you?
Yeah, I said that question is difficult, and I was really trying hard. And when Magnus started, okay, the first thing we think is about identities and who has access to what. I was thinking, okay, that was probably not the first thing I was thinking of, but yeah, probably this should have been the first. That was my first thought, which I had. Starting a new Azure solution, I must admit that more or less we start with the best practices established before. So starting with this, I'm thinking mostly of the people I'm working with, not the software, but the people and the knowledge these people are having, and their experience in certain areas. I don't think that limiting the, I mean, it's a vast topic. You could not educate all of the team in everything, or you really need to have a layered team with lots of people and probably some security experts doing only this. I'm a practical person from some perspective. So that is why I'm trying to see whether this solution is similar to something we have already worked, and to share stories and things we have done wrong somewhere else. And if we already have established good practices to follow them. So I'm definitely not thinking of the technology itself on first place. Probably this is a wrong answer, but frankly, this I know a wrong but frank answer. And what Magnus said, yeah, probably what he said should have been the first thing which we should have.
There's so many things, man. There's no right or wrong.
I'm thinking of the people on the team when starting a new project, and what do they know, and how do they work, and the way they think, and give them examples from the past where we have failed, or example. We were stupid enough just a couple of years ago to have to raise a virtual machine, and we never thought that someone would be able to discover our virtual machine that fast. We just thought we just deploy virtual machine in Azure, and it was found within a matter of hours, and someone started to brute force with different passwords. So from that point on, we know that this machine shall always be behind a firewall. So this is something like things which if there is a service which we're using, we already learned a couple of things which we shall do with this service. And just an example.
Yeah, thank you. Everything is about the people. I agree with you. And probably also few words which you want to say to our attendees at the end.
You go first, guys.
Mike, you're the host.
I'm the host, and what I would like to say, yes, security is one of the most important aspects in modern solutions, and you always need to think about this. Never forget about security, because if you missed some important things from the beginning, later you should pay much more to fix it.
I remember myself. Okay, I will be second. I just wanted to hear what the host will give as a direction. I really love giving examples from the past. And when I started as a young developer in, I don't know, 2002, 3, I don't really remember when was that. You probably know a guy named Svetlin Nakov. He was educating us in the university, and we were first grade students, and we were watching it, what he's doing with large eyes. And I remember when I was getting introduced in a solution by some senior developers. I was joining senior developers in our team, and I just learned about SQL injection, decided to test it, and managed to log in as admin within 30 seconds. This was the newbie in the team. I would say never overlook security issues. You could have. I have heard of the developers which were senior developers at that time. They were saying, at the end, the user wants to do his job, so basically this should work. So the function is what is important. The times changed, and there is time to change the mindset, and always think of security. You're thinking of the functional requirements. You know that in enforcing some security rules are going to cause some trouble, like the security guy is always closing the ports, and then you have trouble, and he would open them if you have a trouble, but you would like to save this effort to yourself and not have the trouble. So it is you it's give and take. You have some it's causing trouble to the team, but you have to think it because it's more and more important, and times have changed to dramatically the last 20 years in this direction.
Rado?
So I would develop on the idea that Evelyn has, that he already started. So the way I see security is always as a trade-off between usability and the security itself. Because if you make something too secure, then user will have a hard time figuring out how to access it, and they will have to use different methods of security. And generally, you make it difficult for them. So there is always a trade-off between how far you should secure the things.
Magnus, we are back to you.
Right. These were good examples indeed. So I'm going to go a little bit lower tech on everyone here, but to propose that people who are going to use the cloud platform take some time, or at least help to figure out what additional benefits could I get from a cloud platform that we kind of didn't have before. The good old days, we would take the access to the database, and we'd create a connection string, and we would take this connection string and we would configure it into the application in like the web config file or something like that. That was how it was done. That was practice, the common standard. One example of a feature of the Azure platform that is just phenomenal, just absolutely phenomenal, is the managed identities. Where you just switch on a managed identity for an instance of your compute. Say you have a web application instance that you're running in Azure. You just flip a switch that says, I would like a managed identity for this thing. What happens behind the scenes is that Azure creates inside of your Azure Active Directory an identity for that specific instance. And then you can, when you have an identity for something in the Active Directory, you're able to configure access for that into like the database, for example, which means that you do not have any needs for configuring at all a connection string in your application. Doesn't need to be one, because the application, the compute instance is its own identity and have access, which means that no one else can connect to your database, steal your connection string, or connect to your database to pretend to be that application, because the Active Directory will never give out that secret, and it will manage and renew any certificates or anything that this identity needs. So it's just one technical example of a feature of the cloud platform that we never had this before. And this is a very strong security enhancement, because all of a sudden there is no secret to steal. You can't steal a secret if it's not there. And this is a wonderful example of strengthening security by using a native cloud era platform feature.
Thanks for that one. I was having that one in mind and forgot to share it. The modern way of using is no more users and passwords, but identities.
Yes.
Absolutely agree. And in the very end, one additional point, Magnus is part of the team organizing worldwide Global Azure event. And I'm not sure if we can have some news when we are planning to have this event next year, or at least when to expect some news.
You will be able to expect these news within weeks or a month or something very soon, because again, the Global Azure event will happen again next year. Of course, it's been very strange with the pandemic and not being able to have physical meetups and so on. And it's going to continue to be strange, because in some parts of the world, and let's not go into that, there's a lot of lockdown and problems right now. And in other parts of the world where vaccination coverage, for example, is going really well, it is completely open and there are no restrictions. So this time in the spring, soon to be announced for Global Azure, I am very sure that there will be some locations where they can have a physical face-to-face, meetup in 3D with actual 3D people, right? Rather than these 2D versions that we have in front of us right now. And in other places, it is going to have to be a virtual event again. So we're working on trying to understand how to do both, kind of allowing for both, right? It's a challenge, but this pandemic has taught us a lot of things about the world and society.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks to all of you for this awesome event where you shared very good practices and what you know about security. It will be very helpful for people who are working on Azure platforms. I really appreciate your contribution and hope to see you soon again at our edition, Azure MVP Unplugged.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.